Practical Support Manager at NCVO, and it's really great to be here, and I'm going to be chairing today's webinar. So just to move on and do a little bit of a kind of introduction. So the first question is, why are we here? So as you all probably are aware, I'd say we're in the midst of a perfect storm. So from the COVID-19 pandemic to climate change to the current war in Ukraine, as we all know, prices for nearly everything we buy have gone up, and especially energy. The impact on charities and the communities they serve is obviously really evident. So as a result of rising costs, a more challenging fundraising environment and increased demand, we're hearing constantly about how many charities are having to change the way they operate and seriously consider how and if they can prepare for the difficult months ahead. So the Office for National Statistics shared that 94% of adults reported their cost of living had increased compared with a year ago, with 58% of people living in the most deprived areas spending less on food and essentials. I'm sure these stats are no surprise to any of you. So today, with the support of our fantastic trusted supplier, Utility Aid, and also a valued partner of SCVO, we're going to be exploring some ways in which you can reduce your energy consumption and costs. So Utility Aid are going to provide you with some tips, which will hopefully help you to navigate this current volatile market. So just in terms of who's with us today, I'm really delighted to be joined by Beth Mukushi from SCVO, who's Head of Support Services. We've got Emily Berry from Utility Aid, who's their Partnerships Manager, Sally Ann Beaver, again from Utility Aid, who's their Sales Director, and William Campbell, also from Utility Aid, who's their Commercial Director. So moving on, just to go through a little bit of what we're going to be covering. So obviously I'm here doing the welcome, housekeeping and introductions, the boring bit, but I'm soon going to hand over to Emily from Utility Aid to just really kind of get into the meat of today's webinar. And then at about 12:10, we're going to have a bit of a Q&A. So do please, as we go through the presentation, put your questions in the Q&A function. If you can do that rather than putting questions in the chat, that would be much appreciated. And then before we end at 12:30, I'm just going to do a bit of signposting and sort of share some useful resources. And then, yes, the webinar will go on for an hour and we'll aim to close at 12:30. So just before we kind of, as I say, we hand over to Utility Aid, just a little bit about NCVO and then also about SCVO. So in case you aren't aware or you're unfamiliar with us, so NCVO is the largest network for charities and volunteering. We're proud to represent and support over 17,000 voluntary organisations of all sizes, from the biggest household name charities to the smallest community groups. So our members range from the big medical research charities to local amateur sports clubs. And at their heart, they all have the aim of making the world around them a better place. This shared aim links directly to NCVO's vision, which is a society where we can all make a difference to the causes that we believe in. And to make our vision a reality, last year we launched our new strategic goals, where we aim to support, so enabling charities to make a bigger difference, to amplify, so speaking up with charities and volunteers, and also to connect, so uniting those who want charities to thrive. I'm going to hand over to Beth now, just to talk a little bit about SCVO.
Great, thank you very much, Josie, and hello everybody, absolutely delighted to be here with you today. So SCVO are, as Josie said, the sister council for NCVO, but obviously with a Scottish context. We have a very similar profile of members and a similar range of support to that NCVO offers. And just for the sort of Scottish flavour, so in Scotland there's about 40,000 voluntary organisations, ranging from those small volunteer-led community groups right through to large social housing providers. And we offer practical support, hard-edged influencing and development opportunities for our members in the wider sector. And just to give a little bit of the context in Scotland just now around this particular issue. So since the start of the COVID pandemic, we've been running something called the Third Sector Tracker, which is a longitudinal research study with a statistically significant sort of proportion of the sector. So about 700 organisations complete this on a quarterly basis. And initially we'd planned for it to give us kind of robust data about COVID and the impact of COVID and how that was playing out. But as we've sort of headed straight into this new crisis and the cost of living crisis is affecting us all, the data is giving us really valuable information about how that's playing out as well. So our most recent tranche of findings was showing that about 93% of voluntary organisations in Scotland were experiencing rising costs, and for 50% of organisations, energy costs is the most pressing issue that they're facing. And we know that's not going to be experienced equally across the whole sector, but it's a really significant challenge to most of the sector at this point in time. So delighted to be here with you today and looking forward to the conversation and the questions.
Great, thanks, Beth. So just a little bit of housekeeping, the sort of boring stuff to get through. So you'll hopefully have noticed that closed captions or subtitles have been enabled. You can turn these on and off by clicking on the CC icon in the toolbar at the bottom of the screen. We also, some of you might have had the PowerPoint slides in advance, but anyway, we're sharing them in the chat for you today. So hopefully, yeah, if it would help you with accessibility, you can download these to your computer so that you zoom in and out of the slides as we go along today. So in terms of other matters, so hope you have a coffee in hand because we're not going to be taking a break and we will be running through until 12:30. If you have a question, please post it in the Q&A function, as I mentioned earlier. You can feel free to put kind of comments in the chat box and those will be shared with the panelists. And obviously, yeah, we will be monitoring the chat throughout. You'll see that your microphones and videos are sort of automatically off. From our side, we're not anticipating any fire alarms, but always worth saying that do keep an ear out for them wherever you are. And yeah, just in terms of sort of confidentiality, please do sort of respect confidentiality in terms of what is being shared by others. And then finally, today's session is being recorded. And by being here, you acknowledge this, and the recording will be sent to those who have registered for the webinar, and it will also be put on NCVO's YouTube channel and cost of living page. So before I hand over, and I promise you this is the last thing, before I hand over to Emily, we've just got a quick poll for you, just to kind of get your feeling about the kind of next 12 months, I guess. So how confident are you that your organisation is going to be able to cope with rising energy costs in the next 12 months? Are you very confident, not very confident, or not at all confident? So I'm just going to give that a minute for the results to come through. So hopefully we shall see the results. So there we go. So only 5% are very confident. We have 48% who are confident. It looks like there are slightly more people that are confident than not very confident or not at all confident. But only slightly. So there's certainly a significant percentage here who are not very confident or not at all confident. So interesting. Thank you for that. So I'm now going to hand over to Emily from Utility Aid.
Thank you, Josie. I'm just going to share my screen. So just bear with me, everybody. Hopefully everyone can see that okay. So first of all, huge thank you to everyone for having us, especially NCVO and SCVO team. I'm going to cut straight to the chase on this because I know we're on a tight schedule for today. So today we're going to be talking about a number of different elements that customers have asked us about consistently this year. And one of those, as you can probably imagine, is the energy bill relief scheme. And what that actually is and what that means. So to start off with, I wanted to go over that in a little bit more detail. So from the 1st of October 22 until the 1st of March 23, the commodity cost of a unit of electricity will be capped at 21.1 pence or £211 per megawatt hour. And an equivalent unit of gas will be capped at 7.5 pence or £75 per megawatt hour. This discount will apply to all tariffs and contracts commencing from the 1st of October or onwards, which have been signed on or after the 1st of December 21. And this discount should automatically be applied to October bills, which normally would have been issued in November. So some of you might have already seen this being impacted on your bills already. Those who are on default, deemed or variable tariffs will find that the discounts that are being offered by the governmental scheme are capped, and they might not save as much as those who are on fixed contracts. And when we looked into this into a little bit more detail, the government website states that the amount of this maximum discount is likely to be around £345 per megawatt hour for electricity and £91 per megawatt hour for gas. And this is subject to wholesale market development, so as things change and move. Non-domestic customers on default or variable tariffs, so essentially if you're on anything that's out of contract, will therefore pay reduced bills, but these will still change over time and may be subject to price increases. So when we're referring to that, what we're meaning is that the maximum amount that's being given by the government may be overlapped by out of contract prices if markets continue to increase and become volatile. I'm just going to ask Sal to step in here, Sally Ann. Sally Ann, did you want to add anything in addition to that? Because I know we had some interesting figures through yesterday about the increases in prices that have been forecasted.
So at this moment in time, prices are on the rise. There's a lot of issues that are going on within the marketplace at this moment in time that are driving forward prices. So we did Brexit as a country, however, we did not Brexit from Europe, and there's driving forces in Europe that are actually still pushing up our prices. So with regards to contractual issues, if you're not in a contract at the moment, I'd highly recommend that you get into a fixed price contract now, if possible, because of what the driving factors are in the market, but also to protect yourself with EBRS, because EBRS is so capped that out of contract rates are going over £1 a kilowatt hour, and they're increasing month on month, and suppliers, there's no limit on what they can charge you on out of contract rates.
Thank you, Sal. We've also put, for a bit more information here, the link to the website where we've gained this information from. So if you've got any further questions or just want to check it yourself, please feel free to do so. There are a couple of things when we have been reviewing the energy bill relief scheme with our customers that we wanted to make people aware of. And one of those was the language that was being used and what that actually means. So when we're discussing this discounted rate, many of the documents that we see online are referring to wholesale prices, and these are not your final cost. The wholesale price per unit is what energy suppliers buy the energy at. The cap is not applied to any non-energy related costs, and your final cost will be made up of a variety of different aspects depending on your supplier. So not only will you have your wholesale cost, but you'll also have the charge the supplier adds to that. So that will be things like taxes and levies in addition. So you may find that even though the government have announced that the electricity is capped at 21.1 pence per unit, you'll be paying a higher rate on that on your invoice that you receive. And the second part that I wanted to kind of draw everyone's attention to, and a lot of you may have had experience of this during this year, or maybe even during the pandemic period, certain organizations or sectors were being defined as credit risks. So when they were searching the market and trying to find new deals and fix into a fixed contract, they were really struggling because suppliers were averse to provide them with an offer because they deemed them as a risk. What we did initially hope was that this government support scheme would encourage suppliers to relax those credit restrictions on those organizations and sectors that have been previously impacted. Sally Ann, would you say that that has been the case since this has been announced? We have seen a change in suppliers' view on those organisations, would you say?
There are issues with regards to credit risk. So if you're in retail and hospitality, for example, your credit risk is astronomical at this moment in time. We've worked, because we only work with charities and not-for-profits, we've worked very, very closely with suppliers at this moment in time. There was an issue with churches where they suddenly became an excessive credit risk, and we negotiated with suppliers that there's not many churches that you see going under. So why is this the case? And it all links back to experience. So making sure that your Experian credit rating is on there and up to date is extremely important. But yes, there has been significant issues with regards to credit. However, working with utility aid, we have agreements in place with certain suppliers whereby if you've got a charity number, you won't be credit assessed. So, but again, suppliers are very risk averse at this moment in time with the recession coming on. So they are asking more for security deposits, and a lot of suppliers are also turning away organisations, which is very disappointing. But like I say, we do work with a lot of suppliers, have very regular meetings, and raise your profiles with those suppliers as being sound organisations that are not likely to go under over the next year.
Thank you, Sal. So I think if anyone that's experiencing an issue like what Sally Ann was just explaining, please feel free to get in touch with us, and we can advocate on your part and help you and support you in finding someone that will support you and take you on at this time. Thank you, Sally Ann. The other section that we get a lot of questions about is how will my organisation get the discount once I'm in a fixed contract, or once I'm in a contract in general. There is a really important thing to mention here. I've had a few reports from some organisations that I work with saying that they have received calls suggesting that the customer needs to fill out an application form to receive the discount. This isn't the case. Suppliers should automatically apply the discount set out within the scheme to your bills. So if you do receive any calls like that, please don't follow them through and make sure that they go away, because that's not a genuine call for action there. You don't have to apply directly, and if you require any support or explanation on if you're being charged correctly, if you're getting the right discount, or if you're just not sure if you can find where the discount is on your bills, then please do get in touch with us, because we have the expertise and the software and the capacity to be able to help you with these kind of questions and queries. So any concerns about how you're being charged, do get in touch with us and we'll be more than happy to help you. Which I think brings me on to my next slide, which is actually a poll, which I'm going to pass over to Helen, if you're there, Helen. Thank you very much. So this poll for everybody to answer, if you could please, is how do you feel about the support that is being offered to charities by the government via the Energy Bill Relief Scheme? So the answers we've got here: it's great, it's making a huge difference, okay, it's making some difference, not very happy, the impact is minimal, not at all happy, we remain very concerned about our survival, or I don't know what the support available is. I'll just leave that for everybody to take their time and put their answers in for that one. Oh, great. Okay. Thank you, Helen. So we have, okay, this is quite interesting. So there's quite a lot of you that don't know what support is available. That's something that we did expect would be the case. So I'm pleased that we've gone over the Energy Bill Relief Scheme in a little bit more detail. And not very happy with the impact. The impact is minimal. This is something that Sally Ann's spoken about a lot recently, with some organisations not being involved in the Energy Bill Relief Scheme. So we will be providing further materials and blogs on this subject as it keeps developing. So please feel free to get in touch with us for more info, or if you've got any further questions. Let me just This takes me on to a very pertinent question that I get asked a lot when I'm at events at the moment is, if I'm up for renewal, what are my options? There's a lot of people at the moment that are in a position where they're up for renewal within the next 6 months or next year, and they're really not sure which way to go or what to do next. It's really important to mention that nobody 100% knows what the market's going to do next year. So instead of basing your next steps on things that you're not sure on, what is better to do is base it on something that you know. And we hope that that thing that you know is your organization's appetite for risk. When we say appetite for risk, what we're referring to is mainly budgets, I guess is the best way to kind of think about it. So for example, if you're in an organization that has very strict budgets, very tight budgets, we would recommend that you would fix for a longer term if possible, to give you that stability that you need and that you want. If you've got a bit more flexibility, perhaps you want to see what the markets look like next year, then we would recommend that you would review a 12-month option perhaps, and see where the markets are maybe 6 months into that contract. It's really important to mention, if you're on out of contract rates, I know Sally Ann mentioned this earlier, if you're on out of contract rates, it's so important to try and get yourself into a fixed term for at least 12 months for now, because you might not benefit from the energy bill relief scheme as much as if you're on out of contract rates with prices increasing over the winter period. The other part that I wanted to draw everyone's attention to, and I'm going to be going back to Sal in a minute on this, is remembering the difference between fixed and fully fixed contracts, and making sure that you always check the small print on your contracts. The reason why this is important, something we talk about all the time, is sometimes there is a gap between the terminology that suppliers use and the terminology that we as consumers use can be very different, and it can be really difficult to navigate the space and make sure you're getting the deal that you think you want to get, or the deal that you've requested. So we alluded to earlier that all contracts are made up of commodity costs, so the energy itself, and then non-commodity costs, so for everything that's not for the supply directly. And the difference in how that's impacted with fully fixed and fixed contracts is fixed term contracts fix the commodity proportion, which covers the cost for the energy itself. So you're literally just fixing that in, nothing else. That's it. That's all you're fixing in for that period. A fully fixed contract fixes both the energy proportion and the non-commodity proportion for you. So all those taxes and all those levies and all those things that we were talking about earlier, it also fixes those for the entire duration. If you were a customer that would benefit from or would want to have something that is waterlocked and tight, that would be the best option for you. It's really important to check your deal thoroughly to see if you're signing up for the right one. Sally Ann, I'm just wondering from your perspective, because I know you've got a huge amount of experience in working supplier side, what are the key things that people should be checking for on energy deals or contracts to see if the contract is what it says on the tin?
So there's a number of suppliers out there where they say it is actually a fixed contract. However, in the terms and conditions, it says it is open to market conditions. So some fixed commodity contracts are not actually fixed, and they can actually be reopened prior to your contract commencement if the market has moved considerably. So it is extremely important in the commercial world that you read all of the terms and conditions. Also make sure you fully understand in that if you're looking for a fixed contract, you don't sign to what's called a flex contract. A flex contract will follow the market, so you'll get different prices month by month on those types of contracts. So it is important, if you don't understand the terminology, that you seek advice. Also in the terms and conditions, always check. So for our recommendation, it is a fully fixed contract that you're seeking, where your non-commodity is also fixed so that you've got budget certainty. If you don't have fixed non-commodity, areas like for gas, UIG, unregistered gas, which is a pass-through charge, and in power-wise, it will be renewable obligation. So that can be passed through. When you're in a very volatile market, these can fluctuate considerably, because if suppliers go under, the remaining suppliers have to pick up these charges, and what they'll do is unlock any contract that they can and pass through these charges to their end users. Hence, it's important to know what you've actually signed.
Thank you, Sal. And also, if anyone's got any concerns or wants to have their contract checked to see if it is a fully fixed contract, what kind of contract it is, and you're not sure, always feel free to get in touch with us and we'll be more than happy to run some checks for you. This brings me on to my last slide about the energy bill relief scheme and the effects of it before we move on to the energy reduction proportion of the presentation. And one of the key things that we've been monitoring this year is how are suppliers reacting to the energy bill relief scheme? How are they behaving, and how has this impacted what they're offering organisations on a day-to-day basis? So, as you can probably imagine, they're all reacting differently, as that seems to be the way with everything in the energy industry. They're all reacting differently and all do their processes differently. So we're seeing a variety of different offers and durations available to customers from different providers. So it's really important now more than ever to shop around wherever possible, because you'll get a variety of different offers from different people. Be mindful when you're agreeing contracts with energy companies that they are in a financial stable position, and can they provide the key services that you need and you're looking for, so smart metering, monitoring your usage, things like that. In terms of energy companies and monitoring the markets, we do a lot of work in that area. We regularly credit check all of our suppliers that we work with, and there are a couple of key things you can look out for to make sure that the supplier you're going for is a good option for you. And one of the ones that we normally recommend people to be mindful of is to see how long they've been trading for, and do they have a diversified financial mix that they rely upon. Would you say that that's correct, Sal? Is there anything that you think people could check, maybe if they're a bit worried about their energy provider?
It's also worth looking on the Ofgem website to see if there's any fines been put against that supplier, or whether there's non-payments. So at this moment in time, there's a couple of suppliers that are looking like they may be going out of business in the near term. They're not the big suppliers that we've seen, but there are a number that haven't paid their renewable obligation, which is a sure sign that they may have their license revoked in the not too distant future. So again, it is, if it looks too good a deal, it probably is at this moment in time, and always do your research on it and check things like Trustpilot as well to see what the aftercare service is like, because that's really important. You don't want to be with someone then if you can't get a bill out of them, it's inaccurate billing, in queues for hours on end. Or use a broker like ourselves who does that work for you, but also gives you invoice validation as part of the product offering, where we take away all of the queries and we do tenders to get you the best price from the market.
Thank you, Sal. Thank you. So we're now moving on to, I guess, the more uplifting part of the presentation, which is what things can you do internally to help you reduce costs and impact your energy costs on site. So I'm going to be referring to our lovely commercial director, Billy, a lot on this, because he's very passionate about net zero and reducing your energy consumption. The first thing that I wanted to go over and highlight, and I preach this all the time, is checking your invoices. Our validation team at Utility Aid have recovered over 4 million in overcharges found on customer invoices. I think this just speaks volumes about how many organisations are being billed incorrectly. So the most common overcharges we see on a regular basis seem to be incorrect VAT and meter reading queries. Whilst we can't necessarily advise you on what VAT rate you should be paying, that's something that you need to have a look at. I have included a link to the VAT helpline and also the Gov website where you can have a look at those details. If you find that you are entitled to a reduction on VAT, I would suggest, if you get stuck, to get in touch with us and we can see what we can do to assist you with getting that money back from the supplier, because you usually need to use one of their dedicated forms. So any questions or queries on that, please let us know, but please do check. Meter reading queries is hugely common, and inaccuracies and estimations on bills is hugely common also. mostly because suppliers at the moment only have to visit sites once every 2 years to read your meter. And they will most of the time overestimate rather than underestimate, because they don't want to be in a position where they're having to bill you for a catch-up bill. So it's really important to take regular meter readings if possible, and record those. And we'll go into that in a little bit more detail later. Billy, what did you say the figure was for estimated bills or inaccurate bills that you mentioned the other day for how many people are being impacted by this?
There's different numbers from different parties, but we reckon between 30 and 50% of supplier invoices are incorrect.
Wow.
That
Okay.
go out, which is pretty massive. Some people have said up to 60, but I would stick between those two.
Okay. So if that speaks volumes, everyone, please do check your invoices and make sure they're correct, because you never know where you can save some money on that area. I wanted to go over something that we don't really talk about a lot, and when I have spoken about it, people have had a lot of questions, so I wanted to talk about this today to you all, because some of you might be affected by this. And it's something called a mop, and I'm not referring to the mop that you use to clean your floors, I'm referring to a meter operator agreement. Before I go into an explanation of what a meter operator agreement is, it's important for me to highlight who this would affect and how you can check if you are in the position of having a meter operator agreement in place. On your invoices, you will find you have your supply number, and then above your supply number, there's another row of digits. The best way to check if you have a meter that would be affected by this is to check the first 2 digits on the top line, which should be 00. If you do have that and you're not sure what your situation is with your meter operator agreement, I would recommend getting in touch with us or with your provider to see if there's any way in which you can reduce the cost. And the reason why is because a meter operator agreement, more commonly known as a MOP contract, is a legal requirement for all half-hourly meters. Half-hourly is what I was just referring to there with the 00 at the start of your supply number. And basically what that covers is the supply of that meter, the maintenance and the cost of sending consumption data to the energy suppliers for you every half hour, hence the name. The good news is that part of the deregulated energy market we have in the UK, organisations are now able to appoint their own meter operator, rather than simply allowing your supplier to choose that for you or using their preferred one. And it's really important to check this, because when this happens, the costs are often hidden within the standing charges, so you won't necessarily see it on your energy contract at all. It will be a completely separate piece. And the standing charges can be as much as 60% more than if an organisation was to appoint their own. So a really quick area where you can see if you can instantly make, even if it's a small saving, is by reviewing this data. So after this call, please check your contracts and your bills, see what your supply number starts with. And if you've got any questions, let us know. We have a dedicated individual who looks at meter operator agreements and checks to see if there's any savings to be potentially made for you. I don't know if you had anything to add on that, Billy, at all.
Yeah, just one point. So another thing that came to light quite a few years ago, when people were having smart meters fitted commercially, was that some suppliers were not unbundling the costs of the MOP, the data collector and the data aggregator from the standing charges on the invoices, but they were uplifting double for the MOP, the DA, the DC on the smart meters. So that's something else that could be looked into and should be looked at by our team. I know that we do a lot of that and make sure that those costs are unbundled and then rebundled in with the smart options.
Perfect. Thank you, Billy. So please do go and check your invoices after this call, everyone. Make sure, and then get in touch if you need help with checking, because there might be an instant saver for you. Okay. this is the final part of our presentation today, is this section, which is all about becoming greener and seeing how you can save money too. There are a number of ways in which you can reduce your consumption on site, and they all come by starting to look at what you currently have in place, and is there anything that's not working properly, and are there any changes you can make? So there are a couple of points that we usually recommend organizations to do in the first instance, and one of those is checking your equipment. There has been a number of cases where our on-site energy assessor has attended a site and realized that the heating equipment or the air conditioners or the radiators or anything like that aren't working properly or are broken. It's really important to check to see if those are working properly, full capacity, that they can, and that they've been serviced by qualified service agents. You don't want to waste your money heating up something that doesn't work. So please do make arrangements if you haven't already to check that. Checking your lights, we talk about this a lot. LEDs used to be really expensive when they first came out. I'm not sure if everyone remembers. However, the cost has dropped dramatically, actually, with more and more people wanting to buy them. So it's really important, if at all possible, if you want to see a reduction in cost, LED will really, really help with that. It's a smaller upfront cost, and actually the savings, whilst we say here over time they can become bigger, what we're seeing is in reaction to the higher energy prices that actually the effect this has is a lot quicker, because we're seeing such volatile prices at the moment. So if you can, consider switching your bulbs to LED or low energy lighting wherever possible. Reducing your paper waste. So it's a double saver. Obviously using less paper, which is great for the environment, and we love that. But also there are a number of printers that are completely inefficient and a waste of space for using. So it's really important to try and see if there's anything that you can do digitally rather than using a source that is going to drain your power. Check for gifts, Billy, and promote. I was going to come to you on this because I think this is quite a pertinent point about grants and schemes available.
Yeah, there's things have been moving rapidly within the renewable energy and micro generation space. So funders are now becoming really interested in providing different types of funding for different technologies. So we're trying to keep ahead of the game by speaking with these funders and speaking with the organizations who are developing micro generation schemes. So obviously it will depend on your site, it will depend on the fabric of your building, but the cheapest kilowatt is the one that you don't use. So we'd encourage you to keep the conversation going on hitting your net zero targets and speak to us about what you can do to become greener and save energy. Thank
you, Billy. The next slide here is a quick fire round of things that you can consider doing on site, and how much of a change that can actually make to your running costs. So only heating areas that are being used. We talk about this a lot at Utility Aid. We work with a large number of community buildings and rural village hall organisations who have different people in doing different kinds of activities. I know that Billy usually talks about one person might be doing a sporting activity and another person might be having a meeting. So it's really, really important to make sure the temperature is regulated and it's appropriate for the use of the building. Or you can do what other organisations do, which is where they switch the radiators off in each of the rooms and then only turn them on for the room that is actually using the heating and needs it. Check your thermostats regularly. Sounds really obvious, but it's a really, really important thing to do. If you're like our office, I'm having to always check the thermostat because some people keep turning it on. I have met with a couple of organisations who have put glass boxes over their thermostat, which I also, think is pretty good idea, really. Check for drafts and stop them wherever possible. There are a number of ways in which you can do that, which are relatively low cost. And provide meter readings, keeping a record always. We talked about that earlier. It's really important, if you can, take a meter reading at the start or end of each month. And I would usually recommend people to take a date stamped photo, because usually the supplier is going to ask you for a picture anyway. So it saves you the hassle of having to go backwards and forwards with them. And it also gives you physical evidence in case you have been overestimated and the supplier needs evidence to credit you the difference. The final point is dealing with your base load, so switching off all non-essential equipment every day. When we came onto this meeting this morning, we were talking about our households, and I think that's a really good example of non-essential equipment. So you might have at home a microwave, a TV, a skybox perhaps. It's the same with the commercial premises. There are so many things that are left on that don't need to be left on, that you can switch off at the end of every day. Billy and I attended an event last week where a gentleman was explaining that their community building had community fridges that had nothing in them and only had stuff in them on a Saturday, but they kept the fridges on all year round, every day of the week. They've switched those off and now only have them on a Saturday, and they've seen a huge reduction in their running costs. So really important to pay attention to your base load and see if there's anything that you can do to reduce that. This brings me on to my final point, which I'm going to be talking about with Billy in a bit more detail in a minute, which is a possible solution. So at Utility Aid, we've been working with an organisation called ACRE, who represent 11,000 rural community buildings within the UK. And one of the key areas of discussion for us was looking at ways in which we can help those organisations reduce their cost on site and what barriers might be facing them. When we reviewed a sample, which was around 500 people, all 500 said they had the want and desire to reduce the cost and also their carbon footprint on site. But one of the huge barriers was not having the investment, which we know is a big problem for a lot of the smaller organisations we work with. They didn't have the investment to pay for someone to come out on site, to do a survey, to see what changes could be made. And that's why they haven't been able to do anything at this point. So what we've been doing is we've been listening to that feedback, and we've now recently released a remote discovery document service, which we think would be really, really useful for organisations who are smaller and are struggling to make that connection. Billy, I don't know if you wanted to just explain how that works, the remote discovery document, just as a last piece.
Yeah, sure. So what we would do is ask you to get on your phone. We would send you a link, and we would advise you where to go in your building and what to take pictures of. We would, that's really positive because it's a learning piece for yourselves, if you don't already know, about where potential energy savings could be and what to look at. So with that, we would then receive those pictures and write up a report based on what we've seen on that artificial intelligence tech. The report would be quite substantial and give you ideas what you could do and figures on what impact that would have on your organization. So yeah, it's pretty neat, and it's quite exciting because it helps us in our goal to net zero by not traveling as much, and it cuts down costs by over 300% of people going in to do surveys. So it's quite an exciting time for our net zero and assessors team.
Thank you, Billy. If anyone's got any questions on that or wants to have a little bit more information about that, then please do get in touch, and I'm more than happy to provide you with examples and a little bit more information. But from us, before we go on to the Q&A session, that is our presentation for today. It's really important for me to just mention before I pass back to Josie that we are here to help you. We are here, we want to be able to support you and help you as much as possible. We know how difficult it is for the voluntary sector at the moment. We are passionate about the voluntary sector and understand how important it is, the role that you play in our communities and society as a whole. So please, 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 if you have any questions or just need someone to speak to about something, you know, send us an email or give us a call. We're always there to help you, whatever you may need. And then I'll just hand back to Josie. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Emily, and thank you, William and Sally-Ann, for your comments as well. So we now have about sort of 10 to 15 minutes. I'm going to try and max it out as much as possible to answer questions. I think, as you can probably all imagine, we've had a deluge of questions, which we did slightly anticipate, and that's absolutely fine. I just want to manage expectations a little bit, and just say that we are going to try and obviously get through as much as we can. But what I will say is that we are also going to take these questions away and try and do a kind of follow-up FAQ for you all, so that those that we haven't got around to answering, you should get an answer to in the next couple of days. I think, Emily, one thing that would be really helpful just to sort of kick us off would be if you could just sort of give an overview really of kind of what support exactly utility aid can offer. Couple of questions around, whether your services are paid, whether organisations need to pay for your support, that kind of thing. So maybe you could just give an overview.
Of course, yeah. So we provide a range of services that I think has diversified massively over the last 5 years, just in retaliation to what people need now in comparison to what they did need. So we do the obvious. We provide people with the procurement assistance that they will need when finding a new contract, but then we also help and provide organisations with a multitude of different services that affects their aftercare portion of their conversation with us. So that includes validation that we've spoken about a little bit today. So we will check all your invoices for discrepancies, anything that's identified. We will then work to get that money repaid back